Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. With avian flu spreading between species,
if avian influenza comes into our barns, there's no recovery from that.
What farms in BC are doing to protect their flocks. Also, waking a giant. The latest research about the risk of a volcanic eruption at Garibaldi. And the goat that just won't go.
It just strolled out like it owned the place.
The animal that moved in uninvited and wants to stay.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Michelle Ghoussoub. Anita is away tonight. We begin with a warning. Keep your pets away from wild birds, dead or alive. It comes as more cases of a highly contagious avian flu are suspected in various parts of Canada, including here in BC. Ethel Musa has more on how the increased risk is affecting local poultry producers.
There are new signs in Markham, Ontario, warning residents about avian flu. It's just one of several cities near Toronto where birds have tested positive for the highly contagious strain. Experts say the risk to humans is low, but people should still protect themselves and their pets.
The more chances this virus has to jump into mammals, the more chances it has to mutate and adapt to mammals and potentially spread between mammals.
The H5N1 strain has killed off millions of birds around the world, and the animals that eat them too. In Peru, authorities say more than 700 sea lions have died of avian flu since January. In Canada, it's killed off foxes, skunks, raccoons, and bald eagles. When it comes to avian flu outbreaks, experts say there's a trend that isn't going to stop.
There are two migration seasons every year, spring and fall. And those are historically the periods where you will see outbreaks.
The poultry industry has also been hit hard.
Has a sensor inside the barn.
This egg farmer says strict protocols are now the new normal.
When we get to our barns, our footwear gets changed. We put on suits, biosecure suits that make sure that we're not bringing anything inside our barns at all.
The BC Egg Producers Association says about 3.6 million farm birds have been lost to avian flu in British Columbia. And while it hasn't affected supply, there are fears it could.
It's a huge sense of anxiety every day when we enter our barns. We knock on that door. We don't really know what we're going to see. We do everything possible to keep this out of our farms.
The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says there are only 2 poultry farms in the country currently dealing with avian flu outbreaks, and their hope is that those cases will be resolved soon. Ethel Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
It's a TikTok challenge gone wrong after a Courtney couple say they'd had enough, and a warning, the video is quite disturbing to watch. It happened at a home on Crown Isle. The couple involved declined an on-camera interview, but say the harassment began 3 to 4 years ago. They believe it's some sort of TikTok challenge where someone will go to the door of a home, kicking it hard and then taking off as another person records it on video. This time the couple placed a string of fishing line across the front door, tripping up the young person doing the kicking before the homeowner races out and tackles the suspect. Residents say their concerns about the door kicking haven't been taken seriously by police.
Well, I thought that was one heck of a tackle, but I can't blame the homeowners one bit for going out and trying to put a stop to this.
CBC contacted RCMP about potential charges, but has not yet heard back. Well, it's been 25 years since Nirmal Singh Gill was killed in a racist attack in Surrey. This weekend, a documentary about the hate crime will be screened for the first time. Saurabh Sandhu met with the filmmaker who has spent years investigating the impact of his death.
It's been 25 years since Nirmal Singh Gill was brutally beaten to death in the parking lot of Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara in Surrey. A year later, 5 men identifying as white supremacists were sentenced for his killing, a revelation that sent shockwaves through the community.
It was a very sad time, a very difficult time when a senior, who was working at the Gurdwara church, right, was killed by the young men, and they killed this person for no reason at all other than the hate they've been taught by their friends or the group or the organization they belong to.
Imtiaz Popat was fresh out of film school when he started documenting the aftermath of the tragedy.
This event was a pivotal point in my life because it was a shock, right? And it has shaped my anti-racist activism, my journalism, my film work, to talk about the hate that was happening 25 years ago, continues today too.
For years, Popat has been working on his documentary, Hate Can Kill. Now he's finally ready to show it to the public.
I think it's important that we need to remember, or at least look at what's going on and what is being done and what is not being done. I mean, there is still no clarity on hate crime legislation, hate crime laws, or what they can be done.
While the crime is 25 years old, hate crimes like it are on the rise. A recent report by BC Human Rights Commissioner indicates a steep increase in police-reported hate crimes over the last few years, with an increased spike in hate crimes against Asian community during the pandemic.
Sometimes we forget about it because we don't have any reference point to the past, right? And then we can't move forward. I think the new generations, lots of Indo-Canadians are coming in, people from other part of the world coming in here, for them to realize what the world was like.
The documentary has been accepted at Montreal's South Asian Film Festival and will be screened in May this year. Another screening has been planned in Surrey this Sunday. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Surrey.
A widow's battle to resell burial spaces underscoring Metro Vancouver's real estate crunch. Sheila Carnahan's late husband bought 2 plots at a Burnaby cemetery in the 90s for $1,500. The value now stands at $20,000. While Carnahan's husband died 2 years ago, the spaces weren't used and the family wanted to sell them privately. The lawsuit filed in BC Supreme Court says the cemetery wants the plots back for the original price. Carnahan's claim is for the present-day value of her plots. The cemetery has not responded to the lawsuit. Indigenous child welfare has been a priority for First Nations over past years. Overhauling the system and giving First Nations more say and legal jurisdiction over care was one of the main recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. As Tom Popick explains, the Splatsin First Nation became the first BC band to take control of their children's well-being.
Signed by the Splatsin First Nation and federal and provincial ministers and witnessed by generations of band members, this coordination agreement gives the community legal control over a range of child and family services.
We can't stress enough that it does take a community to raise a child.
Splatsin social workers will now handle things like foster care and protective services for the nation's children both on and off First Nations territory. It means bringing kids close to extended families and back to the community. The province has committed $136 million over 10 years to fund the new system.
This is the first in BC of signing a coordination agreement. And I think this is going to just swing the doors wide open for so many other nations.
But it's not a first in Canada.
The end goal is one day there will be no children in care.
The Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan signed a similar agreement almost 2 years ago after the federal government granted First Nations legal jurisdiction. But child and family services are delivered by provinces. Last fall, the BC government changed legislation opening the door to Indigenous-led change. For Splatsin members here, change has been decades in the making.
So generational healing, that's what it is, what you see. I went through a horrific time when I was 60 scoop and taken away from my parents, my mom specifically. I went through a lot of things.
Former Cookpee Wayne Christian started the Splatsin's long journey, passing a bylaw 40 years ago to build and fund some child and family services, determined to right the wrongs of residential schools and the 60 scoop that tore children away from their families. Over 500 Splatsin children have found protection here since.
And it's very, right here, the battles that our community has done over the years. made us strong.
The hope now that change will heal the trauma of past generations and protect generations to come. Tom Popick, CBC News, Enderby.
The city of Vancouver will remove the sculpture of a giant spider that popped up under an East Vancouver overpass. The artwork near Commercial Broadway Station was created by Montreal artist Junko Playtime, who is known for crafting sculptures from reclaimed materials. The city says it was first made aware of the artwork last week and was not consulted over its installation. The artist will be allowed to claim it during the removal process. Around the world, many people dream to see the Northern Lights, and here in BC, some were lucky enough to see them last night. Here are some photos captured by those who witnessed the aurora borealis in the night sky. Forecasters have been predicting and recording elevated geomagnetic activity from the sun producing solar flares, which cause the Northern Lights to be visible. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. Joe, incredibly jealous of everyone who spotted the lights last night.
I know. Yeah, me too, Michelle. And honestly, I wish I could have given everyone a heads up that it was happening. But this one surprised storm forecasters, solar storm forecasters right around the world. In fact, the issuing agency south of the border issued an alert yesterday evening at about 10:30 p.m. that there were severe geomagnetic storm potential, really just an hour before we saw those lights. And interestingly, not just seen in Vancouver, right across the country, all the way out to Newfoundland and parts into the U.S. Deep South. So pretty spectacular. One of the best shows we've seen in 6 years, but it just goes to show we're still working on the forecasting of those solar storms, the flares, and how that eventually interacts with our magnetic sphere. Okay, I do have a nice sight for you that's happening right now. Let me take you, I think it's still there. Yes, a live rainbow right now downtown. So if you missed the auroras, that's not a bad second place. And it truly is rainbow weather right now across the South Coast. We've had everything from grapple to showers to sunny breaks and now rainbows. Quick look at the radar and you can see that's all showing up on the radar right now with our low pressure system still very much still hovering over top. And that means we've got all of this on tap tomorrow too, Michelle. But I do think we'll see some more sunshine as we head into the back end of the weekend. I'll talk more about that coming up.
All right, it looks pretty wet where you are, Joe, so we'll wait to hear about that.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
One of the province's largest youth sports tournaments drew to a close earlier this afternoon with a couple of close championship games. The annual Junior All-Native Tournament sees teams from First Nations across the province tipping off to try and bring home the crown. This year's event was hosted by the Snuneymuxw First Nation and featured players from more than 100 First Nations playing in gymnasiums around Nanaimo. The tournament is often a feel-good event that sees generations of First Nations finding solidarity and healing through the sport.
Throughout the years, there's more teams, and kids are bigger now. Kids are bigger, they're more athletic. When I was in junior native ball, there was maybe one guy, I think, remember, that could dunk it, and now you see lots of guys.
Among this year's big winners, the Newhawk U17 girls who beat the opposing Silks team in overtime, a game many will not soon forget. And as you might imagine, the tournament inspires a passionate following right around the province, including here in our own newsroom. Indigenous Affairs reporter Wamish Hamilton follows the games closely. Wamish, what makes the tournament so special in your eyes?
It has to do with a gathering. There's more than 90 teams playing right now, and the Nanaimo is like one big giant tribe made up of 90 smaller tribes. There's community, there's connection, there's family, there's culture, and there's storied rivalries on the floor. And it's like one, as somebody put it this week, it's like one big potlatch. When you think about its beginnings, it came from the time when the first tournaments were held when it was still illegal for our people to gather. So these became like surrogate gatherings and remain such today. It's like a big visit.
And Wamish, basketball has deep roots in many First Nations communities in this country.
It does. And it comes from the time when you think about it, in the very beginnings, the first ones that learned how to play ball. they would have learned how to play in residential school. It was a place of suffering. But they took a game that was taught to them and they made something positive out of it. They would go home, play against each other. Communities that lived close together would play against each other. And eventually they started busing kids into public schools. But not all public schools entertained having Indigenous kids play on their teams. So they formed their own teams and their own tournament. And here we are today at the BC Junior All-Native.
Really interesting stuff. Our Wamish Hamilton, thank you.
Thank you.
Last month, Statistics Canada put out a new report highlighting some data behind who is buying properties and what they are being used for. One big takeaway, upwards of half of new properties in the Vancouver area are being snapped up by investors. We wanted to break down the numbers and figure out what it all means, so we thought, why not talk to the man behind the report himself? Our Leanne Young took her questions to the source.
Okay, there are a few stories at Vancouver it's like more than a snow day here because it rarely happens. And talking about housing. Housing affordability, obviously a huge issue out here. And today I've got Josh Gordon with me. He's a senior analyst with Statistics Canada. I dragged him out from behind the desk because he has done some really interesting research. And we're standing here on the west side of Vancouver, close to Queen Elizabeth Park, in this neighborhood that has essentially completely changed in the last 5-ish years, I'd say. And it was just packed with new condos. You know, there's the screens to my left, and there's new builds being developed as we speak, essentially. And so, Josh, I want to ask you, when you look around a neighborhood like this, thinking about the research that you've done, what do you see?
So what we did was we looked at the share of investment properties for new condominiums. What we found was that around half of all new condominiums in Vancouver were investment properties.
This is the first time we were hearing these numbers, so this is a bit of a first. And 50%, I don't think I necessarily expected it, but I haven't seen the data before, and I'm guessing you haven't either. What were some of the other highlights that you found from your data?
Around 13% of single detached properties were investment properties, which is higher than other cities. In Toronto, it's about 10% or 9%.
I thought it was really interesting just because some of the studies that were referenced, I clicked a little deeper and basically found like a number of these researchers had said that the higher your number of investors, often like the higher your housing prices tend to go up, which I thought.
Some people have found that. Again, we stayed away from making causal claims. That was not the nature of the project for us. But others, researchers and others in the public debate will be able to use those data to make those types of analyses.
You're not supposed to give comment on it?
No,
oh, sorry.
I'm joking.
Josh has all these rules that he can't talk about because he's with Stats Can. They are just about the numbers, not here to give you analysis. Or opinions. Maybe some analysis, no opinion. But Josh, this is a unit that you wanted to bring my attention to.
Yes.
This is a laneway home.
There is a higher rate of these types of properties in Vancouver for sure. And so this, in our data, would be considered a property with multiple residential units. In many cases, you'll have the owner who lives in the main unit and then rents out potentially. And so in that circumstance, we would call this an owner-occupied investment property, just to get at this idea that it's not fully an investment property as we typically think of it. And so in Vancouver, around 15% of properties are this owner-occupied investment property type, which is higher than most other metropolitan areas.
Right, so obviously affordability, a huge concern for all of us here in BC. What has the data told you about where incomes are versus the cost of housing? Because there's been some research into that from StatsCan too.
And in Vancouver, you have a greater kind of disparity between the prices and the incomes. You have what's called a price to income ratio, so kind of an assessed value to the family income ratio of about 10. And in most other cities, it's lower than that. So in Toronto, it's around 6, and then in Halifax, it's around 3.
Different.
It is different, yes.
Okay, so what does that say about what's happening in this market then?
Well, that's for a range of people to opine about. The data that we will collect moving forward will really be able to give us a better sense of, is investor behavior kind of increasing or decreasing in the housing market.
And there's policy implications there, right? Because if you have, more and more investors buying, then the concern could be I'm going to say it because Josh isn't allowed to. It could be that, policymakers are catering to, the desires of essentially developers in doing more investment properties.
StatsCan provides the data to have more productive discussions around these topics. Without that data, you're claiming this, you're claiming that, but nobody's sure whether that's accurate or not. And so at least you can have a more evidence-based discussion. And yeah, we don't make a determination around kind of whether investment properties or investors are good or bad. That's not the purpose of the project. Investment properties are also a source of rental, right? Yes, and that's how many rental needs are met. And so there's different sides to this. And that's again where we don't take a stand.
You have left me with more questions. Some good answers, great answers, but many questions. And we are going to find some more answers to the new questions I have. Thanks, it was so great to talk to you.
Thank you, yeah.
So the person we found to hopefully give us some more context is a professor named Patrick Condit. He used to be a city planner, but now he's here at UBC teaching at the School of Architecture and Landscape. And it's really interesting because he used to write books pushing for more supply, so more condos, more houses, try and lower the cost of housing. But he has dramatically changed his tune, doesn't believe that anymore. I want to know why, and I want to know what he thinks about this new data. So let's keep talking.
For the first 25 years of my career, I was saying build, 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 but I no longer believe that.
What
I wrote
changed?
books about it.
Was there a moment that changed things for you?
Vancouver. Just looking at this and seeing all the efforts that we've made here in the city. No other city in North America has come even close to doing the same thing that we have done, and it hasn't produced affordability.
Okay, but we keep seeing, all these new houses. I would say, if anything, more condos being built. There's so many of them. So is that not supposed to help?
If adding supply would have helped us, then we should have the cheapest housing in the world almost, because no other center city has done anything even remotely close in terms of supply. Adding supply is nice for many reasons. It makes the city better. It makes it function better and people have nice places to live. That's great. Do it for that reason, but don't tell me it's going to make things more affordable.
So what about purpose-built rental? We hear that term a lot.
No, yeah, unfortunately, I'm really a skeptic even on purpose-built rental. Vancouver, for example, City of Vancouver has led the region by an enormous amount in the production of purpose-built rental. And the theory was that by doing that, you'd get people to move out of existing rentals into the new rentals, and that would free up the previous rental. It makes common sense. It should make rents cheaper, There should be downward pressure on rent. But what has happened is when people have moved out of those cheaper apartments, those apartments have just rented for the same price as the new expensive ones. And along this corridor here that we're sitting on, the price of a one-bedroom now is over $2,000, commonly $2,500 for a one-bedroom, which is way beyond the capacity of the average wage earner in this city to afford.
We just talked to Josh Gordon over at StatsCan, and he had some really interesting numbers, but I was hoping to get some context from you. What did you make of all of it? Particularly the idea that when we're talking about condos, we're looking at nearly more than 40% of it is investors. How does that change the market when that happens?
This information that he put out basically is just another aspect of the much larger phenomenon, which is that wealth globally, not just here in Vancouver, is flowing towards people who already have wealth. Say you have a home in Dunbar, suddenly it's worth $2 million. You're able to leverage a lot more money from the bank. The way it is now is they basically have two classes. One is people who have assets and those who don't. Those are the two classes. And the people who have assets, and I'm not talking about rich people, I'm talking about normal people, particularly people in my generation, who ended up with
boomers again.
Yeah, boomers again. I know. I'm sorry about that. End up with $4 million. They really don't know what to do with it, and they can leverage that money and buy yet another condo and yet another condo. And they might put the kids in it, but they might not. They consider it an investment. And as that money moves to people who have money, it makes it harder and harder for people, particularly your age, who don't have all that equity built up, to get in and play the game. So you never get your chance to build equity.
Okay, all right, lots to chew on there. Thank you so much for chatting with us today, Patrick.
Yeah, I'm sure that's enough.
That was great. Thank you.
It's been dormant for centuries, but one volcanologist says we need more research about a volcano on the sea to sky. We speak to her next. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. Montreal's Trudeau Airport is warning travelers about a rise in illegal taxis. As John Nagala reports, officials say in the last few months, the number of people being tricked into taking a car that isn't licensed is on the rise.
Legitimate taxis aren't hard to find at Montreal's Trudeau Airport, but taxi drivers say there are more and more illegal cabs taking their customers.
It's not correct for us because they come, other taxis is not airport taxi come in to disturb us. You know, we don't accept this.
Je trouve que ça soit réglé, ça soit régularisé.
The airport says it works like this. The cars wait in front of the limousines or right here, far away from the designated location for taxis. Meanwhile, another person inside recruits travelers at the arrivals, who then brings them to the car.
What we've noticed also is that there are drivers here with fake Uber stickers on their car, fake taxi domes on their cars. So, you know, it can seem 100% legit, but it's not.
The airport believes the spike in illegal cabs can be connected to a change in provincial regulation, which it says allows for almost anyone to be paid for transporting people. And the new rules don't ban solicitation.
It's all about making people aware and hoping that the regulation changes so that solicitation becomes prohibited again.
Travelers say it's not always easy to recognize a legitimate cab.
I got into a cab once and it was taking me to my hotel for a work conference. And, you know, the guy pulls up and he's like, yeah, it's $250. And I was like, there's no meter, there's no nothing, like what's going on? And then he just started driving off again.
I've heard about the situation recently. And for what I've came to a conclusion is that people need to be a little more vigilant.
For now, the airport says travelers' safety is its main priority and is adding extra signage to warn people about the issue. It's also calling on the government to tighten up the laws. The Transport Minister Geneviève Guilbeault says they're monitoring the situation. John Ngala, CBC News, Montreal.
Welcome back. Mount Garibaldi has been dormant for years, but new research shows the volcano could still be a threat. An article published in the Canadian Journal of Earth Sciences examined the potential hazard around Garibaldi. It notes the physical characteristics of the volcanic belt, which it sits on, have changed in part because of rapidly melting ice sheets. The study says Mount Garibaldi poses the greatest threat to the people and infrastructure between Vancouver and Whistler. And one of the study's authors joins us live to talk about her research and these potential volcanic threats. Catherine Hickson, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation.
Okay, the question on everyone's minds, what could an eruption in this region look like? And how likely is it that we could actually see one from Mount Garibaldi?
So Very unlikely, very low probability in my lifetime and probably children's lifetime. So it's interesting. Usually I'm being interviewed by CBC and others when there's an eruption somewhere else in the world and trying to explain what the results of that, like why it erupted, all those sorts of things. So it's actually kind of neat for me. I'm, from Vancouver. It's kind of neat for me to be able to talk about our volcanoes, because really part of our purpose for writing this paper was just to remind people we do have volcanoes here. We do have volcanism. It's not just floods, earthquakes, forest fires. Don't forget, we actually live in a very volcanically active region.
And I think that's the reason that your article has caught the attention of so many people. It says that the physical characteristics of the volcanic belt have actually changed. What are those changes and what do they mean for us?
Well, it's not so much the physical characteristics, it's actually the population change. So the fact that, Squamish is growing, Whistler is growing, we had the Olympics there now more than 10 years ago. That whole corridor is increasing in terms of the number of people and the usage of the area. We also know that because of the melting glaciers and whatnot, there's more of a potential for triggering landslides as we have ice melting in the high parts of the volcano. So it's the increased use as well as the ice melting that is suggesting that we may have an increased susceptibility to particularly landslides, lahars, and we just need to remember these are potentially active volcanoes. So let's just keep watch.
And you've said that Canada lags behind in terms of volcanic monitoring. Why is that and why is it important?
Well, we lag behind because we've got lots of other disasters to deal with, I think. And also, we have not seen an eruption in Canada in our, call it the historic lifespan. So we are working, actually, Mount Meager, which is closer to Pemberton, working with the First Nations there. We're actually discovering that in their oral history, they have record of the eruptions of Mount Meager that occurred about 2,500 years ago. So geologically, what we're seeing is that volcanoes of the southern part, closest to Vancouver, Squamish, Whistler, Pemberton, have had activity that is historic and have been recorded by the First Nations. So again, just don't forget, they are there. We need to make sure that we're continuing to monitor so that we can identify months, years in advance of when those volcanoes might wake up and start erupting.
So interesting. I wish we had more time. Catherine Hickson, thank you so much for joining us live tonight. Hickson is a volcanologist and co-author of the new research.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, U.S. President Joe Biden delivered an impassioned speech in the House of Commons. More on what he said next.
Just live your life in peace, love everybody, don't hate anybody, and do whatever you can to help everybody. This is what I'm telling my son, and just hope and pray. And nothing deserves anything apart from loving each other and live in peace. What's happening is not peace. By killing Iraqi innocent is not peace.
It's very possible that Iraq, as we know it in its present configuration and frontiers, may not exist a year or 2 years down the road, despite the assurances of the US administration. And to these people, having to lose a country, the country of their origin, that's very devastating. So you can appreciate the kind of turmoil that they experience and live in.
Yes, sir?
For the Tahas, it's the mental anguish of fearing not only for their own family, but for the next generation of Iraqis.
What do you think about a kid who's a year old when the war, the Gulf War happened, and he's now a teenager and it's gonna happen again? What do you think he's gonna be in the future? Because nobody cares about the Iraqi people for a long time ago. Why is now? And by killing them, they're not doing them any good.
The people of Iraq is more to solve this problem than United States. And if the Iraqi people don't like Saddam Hussein, they are the one to remove him. But United States think the Iraqi people will throw flowers on them when they enter Iraq. I don't think so. Even the Iraqi people who dislike Saddam Hussein, they will go against USA because it is the national pride of the people.
That sentiment is echoed throughout the Arab world, according to Hani Faris.
To many in the Arab world and the Islamic world and in the third world, this is looked at as American imperialism, the formation of an empire, and an attack on Arab and Islamic society.
In contrast to his feelings about the United States, Zuhair Taha says he's proud of Jean Chrétien and the stand Canada has taken on Iraq.
I respect it so much. It is so good of Canada to do so.
For he and Maha, it may look like business as usual at Falafel Magic, but in their hearts, they'll be praying for a miracle.
I'm sorry I'm not with them, just to hug them. I'm sorry.
Claire McIntyre, CBC News, Vancouver.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
One of Canada's largest retailers says it will change its prices following a CBC Marketplace investigation. CBC found that painkillers marketed to women to relieve menstrual cramps were priced higher than other comparable painkillers with the same ingredients. As Charles the Agro shows, the so-called pink tax goes much further than that.
Coffee. Coffee. Did you take a look at the price? $2.50 for men and $3 for women.
Why is it so expensive for women?
Well, women pay more for lots of stuff.
I know, that's for sure.
At this coffee shop, the same drink has two different prices. And customers aren't impressed with the point this social experiment is trying to make.
We have to pay more. I don't like this vibe. What do you think about the fact that you have to pay more for some things than men? It's outrageous.
But marketing professor Alivarescu says women continue to pay more than men for lots of products.
If they can sell the same item virtually for two different segments and make the price higher for one, then they increase their bottom line.
It's called the pink tax. Recent data from one Canadian company found, on average, women pay over 50% more for deodorant and body wash marketed to them compared to similar products marketed to men.
The price differences tend to be rather small. Over the year and over the course of a consumer's lifetime, they add up.
Marketplace found several examples of retailers selling products to women and girls at higher prices than products marketed as gender neutral or to men and boys, including these painkillers, both identical in size and active ingredients, but at two different prices.
$6.99, 24 caplets. What do you got over there?
24 caplets, $7.49.
In emails to Marketplace, Loblaw, the parent company of Shoppers Drug Mart, where those products were purchased, said it will drop the prices of the menstrual pills to align them with the non-gendered version, in light of its commitment to women's health.
What do you guys think, though? Should we be paying more than men?
If anything, less, because we get paid less, right? It's tiring.
Yeah.
To be a woman.
Agreed. And it's expensive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Charles Siagro, CBC News, Toronto.
You can check out the full results of Marketplace's investigation tonight. It will air at 8 p.m. on CBC Television, 8:30 in Newfoundland. You can also watch it on CBC Gem. U.S. President Joe Biden spent a busy day in Ottawa on the second and last day of his trip. It's his first official visit to the capital since becoming president more than 2 years ago. Ashley Burke tells us about his schedule, packed with meetings, photo ops, and an address to Parliament.
A long overdue visit between two friends.
Here we are.
U.S. President Joe Biden's first official trip to Canada, coming halfway through his first term.
And I tell other world leaders I meet with when they ask about the geopolitical circumstances of the world, I said, we're lucky. We have Canada.
Trudeau escorting Biden to meet the leaders of the opposition.
Leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition.
Loyal opposition.
Absolutely. We believe that opposition is an act of loyalty in our system.
We do too, unfortunately.
The House of Commons packed for the president's address.
No more reliable ally. No more steady friend. And today I say to you and to all the people of Canada that you will always, always be able to count on the United States of America. I guarantee it.
Trudeau, who is at the center of a controversy over his handling of China's election meddling attempts, said it's time to stand up to authoritarian threats.
This is not a moment to compromise on our values. This is a moment to double down.
Then pointed to the crowd.
Two men who are here with us today, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor.
A standing ovation for two Canadians arbitrarily detained in Chinese prisons that both countries helped free.
They're safely back to their families.
A day of talks also led to what both countries are claiming as wins. Canada got the U.S. to agree to close a loophole starting at midnight. It prevented Canadian law enforcement at irregular border crossings from turning back asylum seekers, like at Roxham Road. In return, Canada committed that it would upgrade its fighter jet bases, speed up modernizing the North American air defense, and provide $100 million for equipment and support for Haiti's national police. Both Canada and the U.S. acknowledge that there's a serious long-term challenge China poses to international order. In a statement, both countries said they are committed to continuing working together to counter foreign interference. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
U.S. First Lady Jill Biden got a first-hand glimpse at a popular Canadian sport today when she visited a curling rink with the Prime Minister's wife, Sophie Gregoire. As Olivia Stefanovich explains, they spoke with young athletes about issues close to both their hearts.
Good morning. Good morning.
A first for a First Lady. United by their passion for sports, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau took Jill Biden to get a lesson in a Canadian classic.
Curling is not just an activity, it's a way of being. Nice to meet you all. Nice to see you, I'm Jill.
Then sat down with young athletes to promote physical health as a way to improve mental health.
I find that really, sport is my home.
16-year-old Danielle Kova shared how track and field helps him cope with the pressures of teenage life.
I love that line that you said, that sport is my home.
I've learned a lot about myself through running, my limits, everything that I can do.
I would say you have to follow through with a passion.
While 15-year-old gymnast Zoe Babb advocated for the need to break down barriers.
If we would have more sports programs funded by the government, it would let a lot of kids access sports. And I also believe, like I said, recreational programs could be helpful because sometimes competitive programs are just a lot of stress.
Sports creates that balance in your life.
But for some, that balance was thrown off in the pandemic.
Rinks were closed, so we didn't really get to perform our sports, and it was really just not great.
16-year-old Creed Siriamusi told them he couldn't play hockey for 2 years.
They knew that it wasn't a great thing for us, for kids our age, because we were still young, and it affected us a lot.
I think that our mental health really relies on the fact that we need each other to connect.
And it's that connection that both women have made as mental health advocates, helping youth navigate turbulent times that have no borders. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
King Charles III's planned visit to France next week has become a casualty of the chaos and pension protests. The King and Camilla, the Queen consort, were scheduled to arrive in France on Monday for a 3-day visit, but today French President Emmanuel Macron said the trip was postponed. The cancellation comes after French unions called for another day of national protests against pension reforms on Tuesday. Macron was scheduled to host a formal dinner for the royal visitors at the Palace of Versailles, something critics compared to Marie Antoinette feasting while Paris was in revolt. A BC family returned from a vacation this week only to find a badly behaved goat taking up residence on their property. Coming up, what the family is doing with the unwelcome pet they've named Gordo. A Prince George family got quite a surprise after coming home from a Mexican vacation this week. A large and very temperamental goat had taken up residence on their property, and CBC's Andrew Curriata caught up with the family and the not-so-welcome new pet they've named Gordo. Take a listen.
came home, I was unloading the car, and all of a sudden, in the window there, I saw something chewing on the plastic. So I opened up the door, and a big old billy goat came out. It just strolled out like it owned the place.
And what was your reaction?
Well, I ran. Wasn't scared of anything. Came out looking for food, started eating the trees over there. And then I had no idea what to do because I wasn't expecting to have a goat move in while I was gone. I don't know how long it's been here. We were gone for 7 days before we got back, but it's been here for at least 2. It tries to get into the house every time we come outside. It's tried to break into our window, so we've had to keep that shut. The hot tub behind us, and it was just climbing up onto there and like poking its head by the window.
What was that like, having a goat's head coming in your window?
It was terrifying. We've been feeding it, letting it out because it keeps locking itself back in the shed. Yeah, it owns the place pretty much. We called like 3 or 4 of our friends thinking that they were playing a prank on us.
And you've given it a name.
Yeah, we named it Gordo. We're trying to find anywhere else for it to go. We're definitely not set up for it here. And we're not farmers.
And are you a fan of goats yourself?
No, I'm terrified of goats.
For now, Gordo has been relocated to a farm. Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. Joe, all I can say is protect Gordo at all costs.
I agree, Michelle. I'm so glad for that update. Yeah, Gordo needs to rule property somewhere. So I feel like he's taken over whatever farm he's at right now. That is so funny. Also, I love that there was a reminder that there's snow on the ground in Prince George. So yeah, Gordo trying to head in, get some warmth. Temperatures are going to be cold enough for snow once again this weekend for Gordo and humans alike in Prince George. Let me show you the low pressure system that's dropping temperatures from where we were a couple of days ago. Sort of this sinking air coming from the north is bringing the flurries back to almost everyone across the interior over the weekend. No major snowfall accumulations, but cold enough that we are seeing that snow over the next couple of days. Temperatures tonight are going to come down in Metro Vancouver to the single digits, low single digits. So because we're close to the freezing mark, that means we might see some wet snow tomorrow morning. Let me get you to the temperatures that we're expecting tomorrow. There we go. Highs of just 6 to 7 degrees across Metro Vancouver. That's a chilly Saturday, and you probably noted the cold rain today. So waking up to temperatures cold enough to see that snow. So watch as I take you through early Saturday morning. It's North Shore, but it's also the Tri-Cities. Out towards the valley, just a shot of that snow. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some quick accumulations. Not a lot of precip in the forecast, but what will fall at higher elevations, say even just above a couple hundred meters, will be falling as wet snow early tomorrow morning and then clearing out. Looks like a pretty decent weekend. We've got a few showers lingering in the forecast for Saturday and Sunday. There's that little system skimming us for Sunday. I think for the most part, it stays offshore and we get high pressure building in for next week. So there are the flurries showing up in the forecast for tomorrow across the interior. Prince George, nice day for you after a sunny one today. Just morning wet snow for Metro Vancouver. And again, I do think we'll see the sunny breaks, highs to 8 for YVR, back up to a 10 for Sunday, just a stray shower there. Monday, Tuesday and onward, getting back to the other side of the march, the double digits and the sunshine, Michelle. Something for everyone in the forecast, but note those cold mornings. So quite the diurnal swings in the days ahead. And speaking of swings, you look much drier than you did a few minutes ago. So yes. Glad to see that, Joe. The showers have passed. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks so much. It was the heart of the Canadian plane more than 80 years ago. Up next, we'll show you one group's attempt to rebuild a Hawker Typhoon engine.
I'm here today at New Orchard Lodge. It's a long-term care home here in Ottawa, and I'm joined here by a scientist, Aaron. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Aaron, can you tell us why we're here today?
Yes, we're here to swab the floors to detect the virus that causes COVID-19.
Okay, and this is something you have done before, or your team has done before?
Yes, we've done it in several settings, including hospitals, and we've identified that we can, in fact, reliably recover the virus from the floor samples.
Okay, well, show us what we have here. It looks like a swab and some liquids.
These are our swab kits, so we have basically a swab, which is just an ordinary old swab, and a collection tube, which has some liquid inside it that acts as a preservative for the viral particles.
Could you tell me why floors? Why are we swabbing the floor out of all the places here in the long-term care home?
Well, the short answer is we tested lots of different surfaces, and we found that floors were the best, most reliable surface that we could actually recover the virus.
Okay, and it's sort of like a sink, for example, that kind of captures all the viruses?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you show us how you swab the floor?
Absolutely, let's do it. So we usually just take some common area, like here we're in a dining room, and we just do a small square, about 2 inches by 2 inches, and just basic crisscross swabbing for about 30 seconds. What we're trying to do is pick up biomass from the floor, so biological materials. And so this could include viral particles or traces of the viral particles, like the genetic material. And so ultimately, we need to collect the genetic material of the virus. And when we get to the lab, I'll show you how we're going to detect it.
Let's take the samples that we took today from the long-term care home. We did a few swabs. Say some of those came back positive. What would that mean?
Well, it means that there probably was someone with COVID-19 in the residence. But the main conclusion from our study was that during outbreaks, more of the swabs would test positive for COVID-19 than during non-outbreak periods.
And what would that mean as a conclusion? Would that mean we are able to predict an outbreak when it's about to happen?
We found that even a week before an outbreak was declared, we would find a rising positivity of the swabs from the floor samples.
That's pretty neat. But why should people care about this?
Well, that means that we could possibly use this method as an early warning system for alerting the residents and the workers at the long-term care homes that they could potentially be in an outbreak.
Wow. Thank you so much for going over all of this with me and letting me come into your lab today. This is fascinating. Thank you,
thanks.
Aaron.
It was my pleasure to walk you through the process.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On April 11th, join CBC Vancouver's Johanna Wagstaffe at the Alumni UBC webinar with Dr. Simard and her work on the Mother Tree Project. The focus is to connect First Nations, forestry companies, government, and academics to create resilient forests and stewards of the land. Register at alumni.ubc.ca. And on April 15th, join CBC at the Vancouver Vaisakhi Festival, a Sikh celebration of the coming of a new year.
A Comox Valley group is rebuilding a rare Hawker Typhoon World War II aircraft engine. The painstaking work began years ago to locate and find original pieces. Our video producer Mike MacArthur went to check out the progress. Have a look.
What we're doing here is an airworthy rebuild of Hawker Typhoon JP843. The Hawker Typhoon is an aircraft that was flown by 3 dedicated Canadian squadrons during the Second World War, and that being 438, 439, and 440. There was over 3,300 of them built during the war, and there's only one that remains, and it's not airworthy. None have flown since the late 40s, early 50s at best. So we want to put this aircraft together airworthy so people can see and hear it and reminisce and understand what these crews went through during the war. There were actually Typhoons involved with the invasion of Normandy, June 6, 1944, D-Day, Operation Overlord. Typhoons were a major player in that. In approximately 2019, we are well underway with the rebuild of the structure on Hawker Typhoon JP843, but we're still searching for a Napier Sabre engine that was viable. I approached one of the rare private collectors that owned a Sabre, this one, and I asked him if there's anything that he would do to possibly trade, sell, or would he be willing to donate the engine. That didn't come true, but he, I believe, jokingly said he'll trade the engine for a running Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. We went forward with that, acquired a Rolls-Royce Merlin. It took us just over 3 years of work to build all the systems, overhaul the engine to make it function. So now the process with the airframe and the Napier Sabre is to search through archives, talk to people, search for missing documents, and put as much of that technical information together and dedicate a significant amount of time to being able to reverse engineer and produce the parts that we need to make this aircraft fly again. Everything that we're doing here is being done to airworthy standard. It's all going to be certified, and the goal with this aircraft is to see it fly, to hear the Sabre engine again, and to educate people about the sacrifices these crews made. The day this aircraft flies is going to be unbelievable. I've spent essentially my entire life working to that end. I get excited when we find a document that works for us. To see and hear a Sabre-powered Typhoon fly again is going to be the highlight of my life.
That's our show for Friday. Thank you for being with us tonight on CBC News at 6. You can always watch us on CBC Gem. That is our free app where you can find this show and many others. Zara Premji will be here at 11 with your late news. Good night.